Welcome to another episode of Unscripted Coding. Today we're going to be talking about GPT-4, which of course is an upgrade over GPT-3, which we've been talking about a lot in this channel. For those of you who don't know, GPT-3 was this big natural language processing AI that came about a few years ago, but really became popular because of chat-gpt. Long story short, it is an AI that understands natural language, English, that you and I might say. So you might talk to the chatbot and ask things that are completely not programmed in. So I can ask about the weather today. Probably a bad idea. It's not about the most up-to-date information, but you might ask, which emperor ruled or reigned China in 1639. You might ask about writing a poem about your profession. You can talk about all sorts of things, and GPT-3 and 4 would answer in English. No code, nothing like that. GPT-4 just came out a few days ago, and you're able to try it out on chat-gpt Plus for $20 a month. But if you apply for their API, you can try it out right away and build applications with it. I'm pretty excited because supposedly it is a pretty large jump up, and we see some of it, but it's not fully available. Let's go through a few of the things that they talk about. First of all, it's just smarter. It's just better across the board. Originally, so the previous version, if you asked it to answer questions in a bar exam, so that's an exam to become a lawyer, chat-gpt, so GPT-3, would have gotten on the 10th percentile. And I've seen some of these kind of rank up and down a little bit, but it would answer the questions and it would make sense, but it wouldn't necessarily be true. GPT-4 supposedly would have ranked in the 90th percentile, very respectable grade. And they've done all sorts of tests, or rather asked GPT-4 to participate in a bunch of exams, and it just does very well. So it's gotten to better understand nuance and pull information from its toolbox a lot better. It allows you to put in a lot more words. So previously you were stuck at about 4,000 tokens, which means about 3,000 words between your input and output. So if you ask it to summarize a very long text, it'll struggle with that. GPT-4, at least the one I currently have access to, allows for 8,000 tokens, meaning it's about 6,000 words, both the question and the response together. But in its documentation, you'll see that it can go up to 32,000 tokens, and that makes it about 24,000 words. Half of a short novel is how I'd see it, between the question and the answer. So it's a lot better in terms of lengthier texts. I think that gives you enough room to summarize a lot of academic papers, a lot of say legal judgments, articles, and so on. The one that I'm very excited about that is not available yet is visual input. So previously, this is purely natural language. You ask a question, it responds. But now GPT-4, at least things that I don't have access to, is that you can input an image. And this is a great example where you take an image of a bunch of ingredients, and it's going to figure out this is... even I don't know what this is. Is this butter, milk, flour, eggs? You might take a snapshot of what's in your fridge and ask it to make some sort of recipe. So I'm very excited. I can't even begin to imagine all the applications for this. Anyways, that's a long way to say that GPT-4 is supposed to be a pretty big jump up. So what I want to show you is some of the code that I use in my own API in the back. You can certainly just make calls directly to GPT, but I built a layer in between using Fast API. this is just purely one of my own projects, but you can see that the old GPT-3 used this completion API, which means that you would put in a model, you'd put in your prompt, you have a bunch of different settings that you can fiddle with, and it would spit out a response. You have one question, one response. GPT 3.5, which is chat-gpt, created this new style, which is chat completion. This allows you to have longer conversations. So you can ask it a question, it can respond, you can follow up, I'd respond, and you'd have a more natural conversation. It's not a one prompt, one answer type of deal. It's kind of misleading because you can actually interchange the two. Really what chat completion is doing is saying, here's the conversation so far, please continue on with the next piece of the conversation. It's really still one prompt. So there is no memory. It's not remembering what was said before. You are just sending what the historic conversation has been so far and asking it to spit out the next line. So for example, if I were to try and recreate this in old GPT-3, I'd say hello, and they'd say, that would be my first prompt, and they'd say hello back. And then the next time I send, I'd say, I said hello, you said hello, I'm now saying this third thing, what is 3 times 3? And then they'll respond, it's 9. And then the next question I say is, I said hello, you said hello, I asked what 3 times 3 is, you said 9, what do you say next? Blah, blah, blah. So you're just fitting in a longer and longer prompt each time, and that's how chat-gpt and GPT-4 is structured. So pay attention because you're using a different API entirely, even though I think it's very similar. They got rid of all this temperature, max tokens, all of these things, and you're just sending what's in your content. So we'll skip this. I'll talk through what is happening over here. First of all, you obviously provide your API key. You're going to start having a list of messages, and that's where you're saying, I said this, you said this, I said this. But the very first message is this system directive. You're talking to the system and you're telling it some of the context. So for example, you might say you're trying to answer everything sarcastically. You're trying to answer everything with lies. You are trying to be very accurate, or you're talking to 6th graders, or, whatever it may be. You're setting that context down. And then you're going to append your messages. Now, this isn't great code because I haven't thought about what happens when they respond back and how I can continue that conversation. But you can see that on one hand, I am the user. So I am going to say the first thing. They're going to respond, and in theory, I would append it to my messages and say the role is, GPT responds with hello, with a response. And then you would continue building that conversation in the messages. And each time, you are going in to ask OpenAI to complete the rest of the chat. You give it a model, and in this case, we have GPT-4, and then we're going to give it all of the messages so far. You can do this in all sorts of ways. I'm using Python right now with Fast API, and the whole reason is it's just very quick for me to give you an example. But what we're really here for is to just run through a couple examples here. I have a really crappy notepad right here with a couple sample questions to ask, and we have 2 different models here. chat-gpt 3.5 Turbo, which is the one that chat-gpt runs with, and GPT-4. So I'm going to enter the very first thing, and you saw the code before. This is the prompt. This is the system directive. So I am going to start here with a system directive, and let me zoom in a little bit. You are a grade 8 math teacher preparing some classwork. Write 3 problems that require the use of the sine function to solve for angles of a triangle. Include funny references to the Pokemon world in each problem. I know a few teachers, and I just think this should be something that even chat-gpt does very well. Even the previous generation does very well. It's very formulaic to ask it to build problems. I've asked it to have some references to Pokemon just as a twist to make sure it's not just pulling from a data bank. But I think this is something that, teachers do often. They gotta think of questions, and sometimes they're more inspired to be witty. And I'm gonna send this over and wait for a response right here. I have noticed that it feels like GPT-4 is a little bit slower. This chat response right here seems to be a bit slower than the standard completion. That may or may not be a problem. And this is the answer. I'm going to copy it over to here so that you can read it a little bit better. Let me zoom in here. Ash managed to park his bike near a lake last night during his adventure in the Pokemon world. He and Pikachu set up their tent at the base of a tree far from that bike. In the morning, Ash sees that the bike is across a lake, and he could see the bike, tree, and tent creating a triangle. He knows the distance between the tree and the tent is blah, 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 blah. So this is very formulaic. I don't think, and, it's not just Ash and Pikachu. We have Charizard, Squirtle, Bulbasaur. This one is causing a landslide. I see shooting water. This is pretty cool. But again, GPT-4, and we're going to try GPT 3.5 Turbo and see if there's anything different. Again, I suspect that this is so formulaic, it doesn't need to be very different. But let's run it through. The other thing that we should be clear about, though, is the cost difference. Between GPT-4 and 3.5, it's quite a drastic price difference. GPT 3.5 was 1/10 the price of GPT 3, so it's 0.002 cents every 750 words or so. GPT 4 is actually more expensive than what was 1/10. It's 50% more expensive, so 0.03 cents. That is a 1-0 difference. So let me type this out. 0.03 cents versus 0.002 cents per 1,000 tokens. It is a substantial cost difference. So if you're doing this and the answer is reasonably acceptable, you would rather churn out, 15 of these 3.5 ones and pick the best ones rather than run it once with GPT-4. Pikachu and Charmander are standing at the base of a mountain. The angle of elevation from Pikachu to the top of the mountain is 45 degrees, while the angle of elevation from Charmander is 60 degrees if they're standing 200 meters apart. What is the height of the mountain? You can see that it's a little bit shorter. I think it's a little less inspired, a little less creative, but for the most part, I wouldn't bat an eye. I don't think this is a huge difference, and we can actually run it one more time just to see if it gets something a little bit better. But you can see that GPT-4, version 4, is just a bit more fluid in its language. It's a bit more creative, as OpenAI would say. Yeah, little less verbose. So where they were talking about landslides and shooting water out and picking different Pokemon, these ones tend to be more standard. They just subbed out the names of the characters. Less impressive. Okay, so I think we've already seen some difference here. There's a bit of artistry involved. Next one. This is one where I have a personal project already. If you haven't checked it out, try politepost.net. But you work an office position for a large corporation. You want to write an email that needs to sound professional and courteous while being clear and concise. Please rewrite the following email so it is suitable for the workplace. This is the system directive. And I didn't have a very clever email to send. You suck. Get back to work, you slacker. That is certainly not something you want to send to anyone point blank. But let's try GPT 3.5 and see how they would rewrite it to be more corporate, to be more work-friendly. So there is a dear and thank you. That's always promising. I hope this email finds you well. I want to touch base regarding the work you're currently handling. I notice you're falling behind your targets, discuss the ways we can improve our productivity. Please let me know if there are obstacles. Blah, blah, blah. Very standard email. Let's try GPT 4.5. 4. And see how it does. And I think this is where a bit of the creativity is going to help. I noticed that right away GPT-4 sent a subject line too. And it does happen. I have seen it at other times when I did this test. Dear colleague name, I hope this email finds you well. I want to touch base with you, kindly remind you of the importance of focusing on your work task and ensuring timely completion. Success is reliant on dedication and efficiency. Need any assistance, resources? So still a very similar email. And again, I want to point that price difference. A 15-time difference is substantial. And I don't think that this was a hugely different task. Now, if you were to ask it to be a little different rather than just subbing in your standard email, I think the results would be quite different. So for example, if I wanted to say, please be passive aggressive or please be incredibly witty and funny, that's where you might want to start paying that differential. But again, just like the grade 8 math teacher, you're asking for something fairly formulaic. So GPT-4 might come in where you have a very unique situation. Get back to work, you slacker is, I would think, fairly standard in corporate America, and you have lots and lots of emails that basically say the same thing. But if you're going to start saying, I'm going to sue the company because you held back on X, Y, and Z and this atmosphere, and so has been mean to me, and X, Y, Z, you have a very elaborate story in the background. You might want to leverage GPT-4, who is better at saying and better at weaving those things. If you want it to speak in a different way than usual, then GPT-4 might come in as well. So I'm just going to see one more of these emails from GPT-4 because I think this one is actually pretty crappy. So I think it can do better. Maintaining the significance of maintaining a high level of productivity and focus. So similar again. Okay. Long story short, I don't see a huge difference. Where I think there is a huge difference is if you ask it to write poetry, if you ask it to write a short story or a blog post, where there needs to be more imagination. But my third test is, again, something more around office work. So I don't buy into this whole AI writing all your stories and blog posts for you. I think that will come in the future, but I still don't think it's good enough. So what I'm what I'm doing right now are tasks that I would expect GPT to do in the workplace. So in this case, I said, you're an articling student at a prestigious law firm. So lawyer, student lawyer, basically. You're asked to summarize the following texts for a client in plain language. So take that dense legal document, put it in plain language. It should be professional, clear, and concise. Please rewrite the following legal document so it is easy to read for an unsophisticated client who may not understand all the legalese. That is our system directive. Okay? What I pulled here is just a couple different legal texts. This is a judgment from a Canadian court, and so I am going to copy here the limitation argument. Okay, I think this might be too long for my API, but let's see what happens here anyways. Maybe not. All right, I'm excited to see what this is. I actually haven't tested this one yet. But this will be very important, especially where GPT-4 has 32,000 tokens. You can conceivably, and I can't afford to do this on our demo right now, but you could take this whole document and throw it into GPT-3. So let's take a quick look here. Submits that the proposed claim is bound to fail because it is statute barred. What does that mean to a regular person? Taking into account a suspension of the let me zoom in here. It was 64, was it? Sorry, let me take a look here. 62 is where it started. So over here, it cites a case, nuanced analysis, blah, 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 test of discoverability. Okay, so what does GPT-4 say? Argues that the proposed legal claim is likely to fail because as it is beyond the time limit allowed by law. That makes it a lot easier to say what is statute barred. Considering a 1-year pause due to COVID-19, the claim would need to have been filed within 3 years of the date it was discovered. Blah, blah, blah. Refers to 2 legal cases instead of cites. These are all really good changes, I think. Now, let's take a look at GPT 3.5 Turbo and see what it does with the same text. Oh, I actually like that it removed those paragraphs already. It's a much shorter one. Thinks the proposed lawsuit won't work because it's been too long since a company could have discovered the problem. The pandemic made the time limit for a lawsuit longer, but the lawsuit would still need to be filed within 3 years of the company finding out the problem. Says that 2 legal cases, blah, 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 shows a company needs to know about the problem before it can start a lawsuit. So I'm liking the sound of GPT 3.5 a lot better already. This is dumbed down quite a bit, makes it easier to read. So I'm quite surprised. I have not gone through this in great detail, of course, but I think the gist of it works, and 3.5 has done a better job of making it readable. So that is a little bit disappointing. Next one. This is a legal textbook, and I am just trying to find Yeah, a nice short section. Right here. Okay, and we're going to come back. We'll do 3.5 first. And see what it says. Fairly short. Let me read this and make sure factually nothing is wrong. There's a time limit of 12 months for the Crown to lay charges. However, if the charge is more serious, called an indictable offense, there's usually no time limit to lay charges. Blah, blah, blah. It can either be summary or indictable, and the Crown lays charge more than 12 months after. They must proceed with an indictable charge unless the defense agrees to waive the 12-month agreement. If you want a summary conviction trial and Crown has exceeded 12 months, you will ask them if they will agree to a summary conviction proceeding. Interesting. Okay, that seems perfectly fine to me. Let's see what GPT-4 says. This video is running quite a bit longer than I thought, so I apologize. This will be our very last test, I think. Okay, so legal action must be taken within 12 months of the offense occurring. However, there's no time limit for more serious or indictable offenses. Once again, like GPT 3.5 seems to dumb it down further, which is closer to what I asked for in the directive. I'm quite disappointed overall with how GPT-4 is performing in relation to these tests. However, I of course played around with GPT-4 before this, and I suspected that GPT-4 would be better in all three of these tests, so it's surprising to me that it's not following my directions here as clear as it should. But where I wanted to end this off with is that you have both of the options. I would, if I get a chance, use version 3.5 in general until there is a need or it fails spectacularly, then roll in GPT-4, largely because of the costs. It is not cheap. I'm running hundreds of dollars a month on my OpenAI bill, and I'm not even a large organization or anything. This stuff is really expensive to run if you're building an API. So it makes a lot of sense to scale back to something cheap if you can get away with it. Where GPT-4 comes around a lot better is something that needs to be witty, something that needs to be smarter, more creative. So I think the example is if you wanted to write a poem, if you wanted to write a story, if you want to be very lyrical in how you write your emails, a very specific kind of storytelling, and that kind of thing, definitely, from what I've seen, and we'll do more videos on GPT-4, from what I've seen, GPT-4 does it so much better. The poems are so much more poetic. It doesn't just rhyme, it has that artistic sense. When I asked it to write little short stories, it makes a lot more sense. It seems to feel like a lot more thought has gone into it. The other big one that I'm excited about is accepting images, which I haven't been able to test, but I think that will be pretty interesting as to what you can do. So, for example, I was thinking of throwing bits and pieces together about a holiday trip. So I might have a couple photos, I might have my own diary entry, things like that, feed it into GPT and see if it could come up with a coherent story about what happened that day, or create a little blurb to put in front of my journal, things like that. So there's a time and place for it, and even OpenAI recommends using 3.5 where you can, and that's because no, GPT-4 didn't suddenly gain sentience. It's not amazing, but it is a major leap depending on your uses. And what I gave you today are fairly pedestrian uses. You're an office worker, you're a math teacher, you are an articling student, which I'm sorry to say is also quite pedantic. These are things that happen time and time again. It doesn't require a lot of creativity. I hope that was interesting. We're going to see a lot more of these soon. So thanks for watching. We're going to have more and more and more AI content just because it's so interesting and you can build so many cool things that people haven't been able to build in the past with it. So I'll see you guys next week for another video. Thanks for watching.